Tommy Curran, NBC Sports Boston, joins us at high noon every Tuesday here on Jones and Keefe. That was Eliot Wolf discussing how much power and influence he has on the number 4 pick. Pretty much told you it's up to Vrabel and the coaching staff on where he'd play and if we'd even pick him. So pretty telling answer there from Eliot Wolf, along with our Robert Kraft discussion all day long, speaking earlier today in Florida. Tommy Curran, how are we doing this week?
Great. I think it's been productive. I like this because it's basically a State of the Patriots week, and you get a real appraisal as to what they think they've accomplished, what they're trying to accomplish, and what their expectations are. So I like this week.
So it's always a noteworthy week. You highlighted this in a column earlier in the week. You expected Robert Kraft to speak. He did earlier today. He highlighted the team's spending, pushing back on any narratives about limiting spending. He touched on the team plans, the succession plan, the last couple of years, his goals for this season. I might be leaving other stuff out. What jumped out to you? What was your main takeaway from Robert this morning?
What jumped out to me was how, if you contrast it to last year, I'll talk about this on quick slants. You can hear the sound. You guys probably have it. I hope we don't struggle. I think we might struggle. And then this year it's playoffs. I am so optimistic. We have a foundation. The last 2 years, they've gone 8-26. They have been in a rebuild, talking about creating a foundation. Now Robert believes the foundation is laid. I don't know what happened necessarily between January and March in signing Morgan Moses and Milton Williams and Carlton Davis and Robert Spillane and signing Stefon Diggs. That's not a foundation. Those are boards. The only foundational pieces the Patriots have right now, I believe, are Gonzalez, Milton Williams, certainly, and Christian Gonzalez and Drake May. That's it. Those are the only foundational pieces. So I'm sure the exuberance is related to Vrabel and his authority and assuredness, but they still have a wicked long way to go, which is what Vrabel, I think, is trying to underline. So I think that's an interesting push-pull going on between Vrabel saying, sorry to go on and on, Keefe, between Vrabel saying, hey, we won March, yay, break out the sheet cake, and Robert saying, this is the year.
Yeah.
So it's really a fascinating dynamic.
You know, we talked a lot about the spending last week, and today when he was talking, he mentioned how, over the last 31 years, he's never stood in the way of when, his guys want to spend money. You think Parcells and Belichick and even Gerard Mayo would share that same sentiment?
I certainly know that Belichick would, 1,000,000%. I mean, Belichick actually, I told you guys this. Remember, you guys know your Patriots history. Why doesn't it ever sink in? Think back to the late 90s. Who didn't get a contract? Everybody got a contract. Bledsoe got a $103 million contract. You had McGinnis getting ridiculously outsized contracts. Ted Johnson paid at the top of the market. Todd Rucci, Max Lane, everybody got money. To the point where when Belichick came in, he goes, what the hell have you done here? You can't buy everybody. And he got them back in terms of economically sound. Bill really threw nickels around like manhole covers. Now, that's not to say the Krafts weren't delighted by that, and that's probably a major portion of the reason they hired him. But I don't think that Bill could, with a straight face, ever say that they hosed him on money. They wanted to pay Brady $25, $30 million a year. It's Bill's like, no, we're not doing that. He's 42. So I don't think the Bill could ever say that.
What about last year when Mayo said they were going to burn cash and was very out of there, like, oh, we have all this salary cap money and we're going to burn cash. And then they kind of followed that up by only really re-signing a few of the guys that they had on the team.
I disagree with that because, first of all, burning cash, that was spoken before I think Mayo really had an appreciation for just how outright craptastic the free agent group was going to be across the league. And then in turn, Tyron Smith or, I can't remember, Jonah Jackson, I think the guy's name was, or Jonah Williams has already been released. Mm-hmm. Those are the best tackles there last year. So they overspent on Barmore by a lot. They overspent on Ramondre Stevenson by a lot. They overspent on Wenu. They overspent on Duggar. Those guys didn't need those kinds of contracts. They went absolutely bananas. They did literally burn cash. Not well, but, Hunter Henry and Onwenu were re-signs. They were at the top of their positions. I just think that they're not spending it well. They're not drafting well. They have to keep going into free agency. But the notion that they're not spending, I don't see it.
Do you think Robert Kraft understands his role in the drop-off the last 4 or 5 years? Like, I got a sense that he's still keeping it at arm's length. Like, well, we've restructured some things and really laying it at the feet of Bill, laying it at the feet of Gerard Mayo, maybe Wolf in there as well. And it's like, well, we've restructured some things. We figured it out. Almost like separating himself from the shortcomings of the last few years. Do you think he understands or recognizes, in my opinion anyway, his role in all of it?
I do. I think because he, what do they call it? An elegant solution with Brady and a contract way back in 2010. I think that Kraft really wanted to have an elegant solution to moving on from Bill. Bill would break Shula's record. They go to the playoffs at least in 2022 or 2023, and then it would elegantly end, and you move on to Gerard Mayo. So I think Kraft probably, in hindsight, looks at it as, well, we shouldn't have been hoping for an elegant solution. Maybe we should have made a move earlier on Bill. Maybe I should have done things differently with Bill, and I certainly didn't make the right call with Mayo. I mean, I think that he's kind of owned the Mayo thing pretty clearly. So I do think that he understands that decisions he made, while he might have made them for the right and sentimental reasons, they didn't work out.
Why do you think Bill Parcells is getting into the Team Hall of Fame now, and do you think he should go into the Hall of Fame?
I've kind of wavered back and forth on this. At times I'll look at Parcells and say the legitimization that he created in 1993, by the end of the decade, he was actively trying to undermine and destroy the Patriots at every turn, including by 1996. Really, players and coaches and ownership still looks at that and says, what a betrayal. So that's one thing where I've always looked at, does Parcells, who actively tried to undermine the franchise, belong there? Like Chuck Fairbanks probably belongs there too, R.I.P. But he left in a huff in the late 70s as a coach and never was seen again. But Parcells is different. It's a different era. Parcells is definitely a Pro Football Hall of Famer, as we know. And I think that the sentimentality and time healing all wounds is fine. I think that Parcells ought to go in, despite my reticence on those other fronts, because he was vital. He was important, and it's just a Hall of Fame. I always hate seeing guys go in posthumously, whether it's Kenny Stabler or Junior Seau or anybody else.
So, and maybe you're hinting at some of what Kraft said earlier today, like we want to do this while we're both alive. But like, why the change now? Because clearly Kraft could have done this at any point. He didn't. Forever we heard that, well, it's a public vote and it's up to the fans. And now he's jamming Bill Parcells in, which I think he should be in, by the way.
Yep.
But why now? What's the difference? And is it just they're two older men and they don't want to do it posthumously? Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, I'm guessing the Brady precedent of last year where he just said, you know what, I'm going to bypass this with Brady in right away. And the world didn't end. Didn't explode. People still go to the Hall of Fame. So, I can just do this and it's okay? Yeah, just go ahead if you want to. Who cares? I think they kind of did the same thing with Dante as a contributor, too. So, actually, in hindsight, I think that Dante went in as a contributor. We didn't vote on him. I'm on that committee as well. But I think it would be that. And look, you and I, we all understand the Patriots want as many good headlines as they can and stay in the conversation as much as they can. They still, I think, in many ways, are the number one conversation point, certainly trumping the Celtics and well ahead of the Red Sox and certainly the Bruins, but they could use some positive conversation. So I wouldn't ever rule that out as an opportunity that's being capitalized on as well.
Last time we talked to you, they hadn't signed Steph Diggs yet. They've since signed him, and he had his press conference. I'm really excited about the signing. There were certainly other receivers I would have preferred, maybe based on age and whatever else. But to me, the injury is the only hesitance I have about being all in on him having a monster year. I'm way less concerned about, he wants the ball and he's played on 3 or 4 teams. What are your expectations for Steph Diggs this season?
It's funny, I put that exact question out as a poll for Quick Slants today from Palm Beach.
How about that?
I said 50 catches, 600 yards. 65 catches for 850, and I think it was 85 for 1,000. And I would probably err closer to the 65 for 800.
Is that because you expect him to miss time?
It's all about games to me. If he
think,
plays 15 or more games, I think it's the big numbers there.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
that'd be great. I just think that he's a 12-yard catch guy. I was just looking at this, so he should still be that. And how well Demario Douglas works underneath, how well Hunter Henry does, Tyler Warren when they draft him at 4, that should help take some heat off of Diggs. So I'm trying to speak that into existence, by the way.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to check out tonight on Quick Slants with Tommy Curran. He joins us every Tuesday at high noon here on Jones and Keefe. We call it a Tom Eat Tuesday. You can check him out all over NBC Sports Boston and on Thursdays as well on WEEI afternoons. Vrabel spoke yesterday. I know you wrote about your big takeaway with Vrabel up now at NBC Sports Boston. He's putting it on himself and, not doling out blame. We'll see if that changes over the course of his tenure in New England, but that's where it's at so far. I'm curious on a couple of specific things he said yesterday, specifically on Will Campbell and Travis Hunter. He said you got to evaluate Campbell as a tackle. It made it sound like Travis Hunter would be a guy who played on one side of the ball or the other, and then they'd put more on his plate. Did you gain any insight into what the Patriots may be doing at 4 based on those answers?
Definitely. I think if they take Travis Hunter is going to come in with an expectation that he's voiced that is going to be met with, sorry, we're not doing it your way, Travis. You're 23 or 22 or whatever you are. We're going to do it our way. And you're going to play on the offensive side of the ball because we have 2 corners, a $20 million one and an all-pro. So come on over. Get yourself comfortable because you're not going to have a $20 million cornerback in Carlton Davis who's a backup. So I found that telling because if you draft Travis Hunter, you're probably drafting him as an offensive player. And he's not what you would call a finished offensive product yet because he's just not been devoted at the same level that some of the excellent receivers last year, your Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomases or anybody else who came out in last year's draft. So to me, I find it really interesting, and I thought it was informative, and I did glean from the Campbell answer that if you're going to point out how well he looked in the SEC, which I think you rightly should, is the safest thing to do to make sure you don't screw up the pick and so you can get immediate bang for your buck is get the appliance that your house needs at 4. And I know you guys keep saying, and I understand, you don't do that at 4. But this year's 4 is not like the other year's 4s.
Well, I think if he's a left tackle, I am, all right taking him at 4. I would rather have Travis Hunter, but he might be off the board. So if he's off the board, because Vrabel had that good line about, well, if you tell me who's going 1 through 3, I can tell you who's going 4. And so it does. My takeaway was maybe similar. Is like it probably will end up being Will Campbell, and then I think if a year from now he ends up being a left guard, like, that is somewhat disappointing.
Would you flip out if they drafted Tyler Warren? All right, more traded down and drafted Tyler Warren.
No, I wouldn't flip out.
I heard you asking Vrabel about this. You're like, take all the tight ends possible. I like Tyler Warren.
Yeah,
I personally, Curran would go like if the quarterbacks didn't go in the top 4, my top 4 would be Carter, Hunter, Genty, and then Warren. I like Tyler Warren a lot.
It's funny to hear Robert today just unprompted mention a speed running back, which I totally agree with. They've been missing it for years. But that would be also fascinating and probably something we're overlooking with Genty.
But also when he was talking, was it Caden Wallace and Vidarian Lowe and draft picks? So when he mentions that, when he was Mike Vrabel was asked about left tackle, and he mentions those 2 names, you're like, oh, yeah, they definitely are drafting one. And it feels like if you go to the second round for that is obviously a much bigger risk. So it definitely feels like the smart money would be on them taking a tackle, whether it's Campbell or even somebody else with their first pick, don't you think?
At first pick, or definitely first 2 picks, I keep thinking of the kid Josh Simmons, who the Patriots and Vrabel have spent a significant amount of time with from Ohio State. So Vrabel having those ties would be well acquainted with him. He had, I think it was a patella tear last year, but he might have been the number 1 tackle on the board had he not been injured for Ohio State last year. Could he be sitting there at the beginning of the second round? There's a chance of that. So maybe you can kill those 2 birds with 1 stone. You get your Tyler Warren, then you go ahead and get your Josh Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like that?
Look,
Listen, not bad.
that'd be great. Real quick, Tom, before we let you go, one more on Robert. Not like it's earth-shattering to say that Jonathan would take over and he'd be the next guy up, and that's a succession plan. I think we all probably wrap our heads around that. At least from the outside looking in, I feel like we've never really heard a ton about succession plan talk and what would it look like after Robert Kraft, and are the wheels in motion for that? Did you have any takeaways from that answer? Because from the outside looking in, even if it's obvious, I thought it was interesting he was even willing to go there.
Yeah, and hey, certainly would not have gone there had Greg Bedard not asked the question, which kind of needed to be asked. I thought that he was impressive today, and not just for an 82-year-old. I thought he was impressive. Retrieval, word. We've seen him have times at the podium when I think he's trying to do prepared statements where he struggles more. Off the cuff, I'm not looking at a guy who is incapable by any stretch of the imagination of, owning a football team and helping and making decisions. So I was not surprised that the question was asked because he is an octogenarian, for God's sake. So we got to ask those questions. It's not ageist to do a check-in. But I presume that would always be the succession plan. And I do believe personally that there's going to be a juncture at which Jonathan does begin to make himself more available as he used to on the pregame shows back last decade. Has it been a decade now since he did it?
Yeah, probably about that.
Sounds about right. And I know he's had scheduling conflicts during their last few big press conferences. He's just missed them.
You're a smarmarama.
I am not. Oh, I heard somebody said you called me a mutterer. How dare you?
You muttered. You muttered last week.
He's a mutter, and it was less about you than the overall. I remember what we were talking about. No, maybe she was. Yeah. No, but because everybody, you see this a lot where a player says they don't want to go to a team, and they're like, "Well, don't even try," and then they end up going somewhere where, like, I don't think that was their top choice. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
It was funny when I called you out on the drive-by.
yeah. Just real quick, just want to get it out there. I don't want to sit on it. Yeah, that's all.
All right, we have fun. We have a lot of laughs. We have a great time.
I like a loose clubhouse.
A loose clubhouse is exactly what it is. Every Tommy Tuesday with Tommy Curran from NBC Sports Boston. Check him out tonight on Quick Slants. Check him out on Thursdays on WEEI afternoons. Check out his latest NBCSportsBoston.com on Mike Vrabel and his press conference from the owners' meetings yesterday in Palm Beach. Tommy, as always, we appreciate the time. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, guys. That was fun. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Tom.
Tommy Curran on a Tommy Tuesday here on Jones and Keefe. The succession plan to Jonathan, it's not shocking. It's like, yeah, his kid's going to take over the team.
Most these NFL teams work.
That's how, unless you get into a situation like the Bolins in Denver where it got ugly with really almost similar to what was going on with Wick and Irv and estate planning.
Or if you decide that, hey, we want to sell it at what we feel like is peak value and set up all the kids and whatever else. But no, this seems like it's less. I mean, it's obviously a business for all of them. Don't let any of them tell you otherwise. But maybe it's more of like it's important to keep it in their family.
It's interesting that because Robert could have just said, "Well, I'm gonna be doing this for a long time. Like, I'm not going anywhere." And I know he got into some of that, but he didn't have to answer it. Like, being asked the question is one thing, and it's a good question by Bedard. I didn't realize that's who asked it. But it's a good question by Bedard. It's a worthwhile question, as Curran said. The guy's in his 80s. Like, it's a fair question to ask. That's not ageist. It's a fair question to ask. But he didn't have to engage, and he didn't have to answer it for a minute plus and talk about how Jonathan's going to take over. And if nothing else, I just find that noteworthy. He's now willing to engage with that. Whereas, I don't know, even a couple of years ago, I wonder if he would. So is there a tell there in Jonathan taking on more or getting close to taking on more with the organization and Robert taking on less?